Hello, welcome to Simple IELTS. Today we will talk about IELTS Writing Task 1, especially line graph. First of all, I would like to explain a little bit about what is a line graph in IELTS Writing Task 1. A line graph is a chart that shows the changes of information over time. In this example, the kind of data that change over time is the amount of money spent on books in 4 different countries from 1995 to 2005. And then there are a few things that we have to understand in doing IELTS Writing Task 1. First is that you should spend about 20 minutes on this task. So we only have 20 minutes to do this. And then there's a written information explaining or giving um, a little bit information about the line graph. The graph below shows the amount of money spent on books in Germany, France, Italy, and Austria between 1995 and 2005. Also, there's an instruction that we have to follow, is that summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. So in essence, there are two things that we have to do. Summarize the information or summarize this line graph and then compare the data where relevant. Okay? So, the last thing to remember is that the minimum number of words that we have to write is 150. Fewer than that, we may lose our marks. Okay, so that's a little bit about line graph in IELTS Writing Task 1. Next, we'll talk about how to write introduction and overview. So, the first question that comes to mind when doing IELTS Writing Task 1, especially line graph, is that you have to know the report structure, which normally consists of 3 parts. First is introduction, overview, and then body. In this slide, we're going to focus on these two and a little bit about body, because body, the explanation on body is quite long, and we're going to do that in the next slide. Okay, first let's talk about introduction, which is normally written in paragraph 1. In introduction is where we have to introduce the chart by paraphrasing or writing in your own words the written information. So this information has to be rewritten by us in our own words. Okay, so how to do that? Paraphrase can be done by changing the words with synonyms or with the words that have the same meaning with the words that we want to rewrite. Okay, for example, this is an example of how we write an introduction. The line graph illustrates how much people allocated money on books in 4 European countries from 1995 to 2005. So the line graph illustrates has the same meaning with the graph below shows. And then how much people allocated money on books in 4 European countries has the same meaning with the amount of money spent on books in Germany, France, Italy, and Austria. From 1995 to 2005 has the same meaning with between 1995 and 2005. Okay, so that's how you write an introduction in your report. The thing that we have to remember is that we have to paraphrase, okay? And then overview or summary. Remember that one of the things we have to do is we make a summary of the line graph. So how to make a summary? We can do that by describing the general patterns of data. As we can see in the line graph, all the data increased from 1995 to 2005. So we can say that all expenditures increased. And then we can also write about a feature that is most noticeable. As we can see, Austria's expenditure is the most noticeable feature in this line graph because at first it only started around 30 million US dollars, and then in the end of period it doubled to more than 70 million US dollars. So if we compare the line graph of Austria with with the other graphs, with the other lines, this is the most significant one. Okay, so we can write that down. So in summary, we can write that all expenditures increased, and then Austria's spending was the highest increase. Okay, the next thing that we have to know is that how to write a summary. So we can write it down like this. Overall, the four nations experienced a surge of book consumption over the decade. Of all, Austria had the most significant rise, which more than doubled. Okay, remember, Austria's spending increased more than doubled from 30 million US dollars to more than 70 million US dollars. Okay, so that's how we write a summary in paragraph 2. Remember that we have to describe the general patterns of the data to write the summary. And then this is an example of the summary. Okay, and now next we talk a little bit about body. So in essence, in body we explain the details of data. We can do that by grouping or categorizing data that have similarities. For example, we can group data based on increase and decrease. And then the data that increased or decreased in the example about money spent on books, we can explain them in different paragraph. Okay. Also, when comparing details or when comparing data, we have to show numbers. By show numbers, I mean how significant is the increase. For example, we can write like 10 million US dollars in increase, or the trend is fluctuative, or the data increased steadily, a little bit like that. Okay, let's talk about that in detail in the next slide. How to write body paragraph. As I said previously, to write body paragraph, we have to group the data. For example, as we can see, France and Italy's expenditure started around the same. For France is more than 50 millions, and for Italy is 50 millions. And over time, they increased, and in the end of the period, the numbers are not too different. For France is around more than 60 and more than 50 for Italy. So we can group them in one paragraph. So in body paragraph 1 or in the third paragraph, we can talk about France and Italy. Why? Because they have similar patterns, which is, or i.e., their starts and their ends are not too far different from each other. And then how about Germany and Austria? They started very differently. For Germany, it's around 80, and for Austria, it's 30. So how do we group them? Well, they have one thing in common, at least one thing. From 1995 to 1999, they increased steadily for 10 million US dollars. For German is from 80 to 90, for Austria is from 30 to 40. And then over time they increased until they reached their highest point. So in body paragraph 2 or in the fourth paragraph, we can talk about Germany and Austria because they have similar patterns that from 1995 to 1999, they increased steadily, and in the end of the period, they reached their highest. Okay, so first let's talk about in detail on France and Italy. We can write it like this. France and Italy started around the same, which were around 55 million US dollars and 50 millions respectively in 1995. Until 1999, France's expenditure kept elevating gradually. See? Until 1999, France's expenditure kept elevating gradually. So it elevated, or it increased a bit by a bit. Whereas that of Italy's fluctuated. Italy's expenditure fluctuated. Why? Because in 1995 to 1997, it increased and then it went down from 97 to 1999. So there's a fluctuation in that sense. And then we can continue. Books consumption in both countries continued to climb until they reached their peak at the end of the period, with over than 60 million for Italy and more than 70 million for France. So over than 60 million for Italy and more than 70 million for France. Okay, so that's an example of how we write down body paragraph 1. Now let's talk about body paragraph 2, Germany and Austria. Both Germany's and Austria's expenses rose steadily, about 10 millions between 1995 and 1999. As I said previously, they increased steadily or rose steadily. Same meaning, okay? And then, in the next sentence, the latter leveled off for the next 2 years. But the latter means Austria's expense. The latter leveled off for the next 2 years. So from 1999 to 2001, it leveled off, or it staggered, still in 40 million US dollars. Whereas the former means Germany, experienced a fall until 2003. So the number decreased until 2003. They both peaked at the end of the period with almost 100 millions and above 70 millions respectively. So for Germany, in the end of the period, the number almost reached 100 millions, and then for Austria, the number rose to more than 70 millions US dollars. Okay. By the way, I would like to explain a little bit about how to use the former and the latter. So if in the first sentence we already talk about two different things, for example, Germany and Austria, and then in the next sentence we want to talk about them again, we can change the words with the former and the latter. The former is for the subject, for the first subject, and then the latter is for the second subject. So the latter refers to Austria and the former refers to Germany. Okay, so that's an example of how we write body paragraph 2. Okay, next, let's see the full report of the line graph that we have discussed from the start, from the beginning, the introduction, the summary, and then the body. So in introduction, we write it in the first paragraph, summary in the second paragraph, and then the third and the fourth paragraph are for, each is for body paragraph 1 and body paragraph 2, where we talk about details, about the data, where we compare them. And the number of words that I have written is 156 words. So it already passed the minimum 150 words. Okay, so that's my presentation about how to write a line graph report in IELTS Writing Task 1. Thank you for watching and see you in my other videos.